Okay, for those of you who are joining us, welcome. Good afternoon and or evening or morning, depending where people are. We've got a bit of a global panel here today, so we've got people from all sorts of time zones with us today, which is tomorrow for a couple of you. My name, for those of you on who haven't met me, my name is Derrick Leno. I'm with PACE, and welcome to the next in our line of PACE's Changing Minds webinar series. So today we've got a bit of a treat for you. It's a little bit of a different format. We've got a few speakers. We've got a panel of speakers today, and we're going to talk a little bit about mine operating systems and short interval control, which I know is a hot topic for a lot of you out there. So first off, I'd like to introduce all of you to Paul Moyna. Paul is co-founder and CEO of Commit.Works. Paul and I met, it was probably a year ago now, at a GMSG short interval control workshop. Paul's joining us from Brisbane, Australia, but don't ever say that Paul is an Australian, because he'll rip you a new one, eh, Paul? No.
Like calling a Canadian American. That's a terrible thing.
Yeah. Terrible thing to do. So welcome, Paul. Thank you for joining us. We also have a couple other guests joining us. We have Rob Evans. Rob is a former mine manager at Golden Era Mining. Spent the last 20 years implementing frontline planning and scheduling systems, such as the 721 system for Inco, Anglo, Gold, and many others. Has done a number of projects, looks like 4 projects with Commit.Works. And we are glad to have Rob on board with us today. Welcome, Rob.
Thanks very much, Derrick, and hi, everyone.
Great. And also joining us today from South Africa is Mohini Benzani. Mohini is a geologist and business improvement resource at Anglo American Sabula Mine in South Africa. Mohini has been working with Sabula Underground and Open Cut to get fusion planning software and mobile app up and working so they can perform short interval control, completing their shift plans before getting to surface. So welcome, Mohini.
Yes, thank you, Derrick. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon to everyone, depending on where you are.
Fantastic. Okay, that's good. So what we're going to do today is we're going to start with a little bit of background from Paul. Paul's going to talk about his fusion system a little bit, give us an idea of how that works, and then we'll get into some question and answer with the panel on some of their experience with implementations, what's worked, any challenges they've had, and we'll kind of keep it light. Again, if anyone has questions as we go, please type them into the chat box. I'll see them pop up on my window, my question window, and I will, as soon as I see them and get the opportunity, I will ask those questions. We'll have questions also at the end of the session if we don't get to some of your questions throughout. So with that, Paul, I will hand it off to you and take it away.
Great, thanks a lot, Derrick, and welcome everyone. Thank you for taking the time today, and thanks a lot to Rob and Mohini for agreeing to join me at such an early and late times of the day. I think Rob, it's 6 o'clock here in Australia, 6 a.m, and Mohini, what is it, midnight in Witbank, close to Johannesburg. So thank you very much for taking the time. Commit.Works is a business that is about putting plans in the hands of supervisors so that they can lead teams every day. And one thing I'll just sort of kick off a little bit with our background and where we came from as a business. Am I the presenter now, Derrick?
Yeah. There you go.
Press the button and it doesn't do anything, so we'll see. One thing we've learned over the years is that it's this whole kind of management system stuff is really about people making commitments to each other, And we have a view that successful organizations, it's not changing slide, mate, for some reason. I don't want it to change 2 slides at a time.
There we go. That was you, so you got it.
Okay, cool. So yeah, we have a view that that places, kind of whatever industry you're in, work well when people make commitments to each other and deliver on them. And so, if anyone's been involved in a management system project, there's this whole thing about having commitment meetings, and really they tend to be quite difficult to do effectively in most operations. And I think one of the reasons for that is that they tend to utilize pretty clunky old spreadsheet and whiteboard tools that, at one part of my career, I was responsible for creating. And I think, Rob certainly created plenty of those things in his life. And Mohini's probably used plenty of them, different operations, So, these tools, these spreadsheets and these whiteboards, that get implemented by well-meaning consultants like us, and really they kind of stand in between the mine plans and the ERP kind of maintenance work that people do, and the day-to-day commitments that supervisors and crews need to make to each other. And so I think if this will come in, I haven't pressed it twice. Yeah, this one here, this is a photo from a mine in Australia. These guys had just spent $3.5 billion on SAP before they came and did fusion. And you can see behind the screen there, this whiteboard here, she's taken a photo. She's about to go to a daily review meeting, and she's taken a photo of the whiteboard behind her desk. And that's her number one kind of, where are we up to with all of the different digs in our operation. They really have, they've got modular, they've got SAP, they've got DesWork, they've got all the kind of software around the outsides, but when it comes to what are they going to do today, they're taking photos of whiteboards and taking those to meetings. So we kind of saw this about 5 or 6 years ago at Moranbah North, which is an underground mine in Australia. And my colleague Alex was asked to see if he could fix that by building a better system. And so he was going to go and use spreadsheets, but he actually knows how to make software, and so he decided to use a proper kind of .NET web-based architecture and started building Fusion from the ground up for Anglo American's Moranbah North mine. So that's really where we started. And when we did start there were some real problems on site. And really one of the biggest things is they just couldn't get anyone to agree that the plan that they were going to go and take to work was any good. So, with a bad plan in the hand of the supervisor, there's no way they're going to commit to it. And so, the bosses on the site at the time would say, I wish I could just get people to do what I've asked them to do, but they couldn't do that. And then the crew underground are saying, well, we run this place. And those, guys on the surface don't know what they're doing. And so that was kind of the environment. And so they were unsafe. They were probably, I think at the time, there was some injuries and some issues with safety on the site. They were also not very productive. They're running only about 60 longwall run hours a week, which is pretty low in the scheme of things. And they were not performing. They had bad issues with their union, and real troubles underground. So I think that one of the reasons for that, it's not the whole reason, but one of the reasons for that is that they'd used a couple of consultants in the past, and they'd done some good work to get kind of the behaviors right. But when you looked at it, a lot of the kind of tools that people used were disconnected and manual. operating system. So, you know, that if you took the annual plans and you kind of went down through the management processes there, you would be very lucky to get anything more granular than a week. Same with maintenance, the project work, all these kind of different systems never really got down to the frontline supervisor or the operator, and it was left to these spreadsheets and whiteboards to do that. So you'd be lucky if 10 or 50% of the work on a site was actually planned every day. And that meant that, you know, they'd go to do something and then something would be in the way, or there wouldn't be the machine that you thought was supposed to be there wouldn't be available, or
Hello, Paul. I lost you there. Oh, I think Paul froze out there. Hopefully we get him back. We'll give it a second, see if Paul comes in. His internet may be causing us some problems. We weren't concerned about his connectivity there. We were more concerned about Mohini's connectivity. So hopefully Paul's recognized that he's not on anymore and tries to sign back in. So Mohini, why don't you tell us a little bit about what things were like prior to your implementation of Fusion? Does this give you kind of bring you back to where you guys were prior to that?
Yeah, I think from my side, it is important that I get to give everyone a brief overview of where I come from before joining the team that I'm currently working with at Sabula. So I started my career as a geologist. I was working in the Kalahari manganese field, which holds 80% of the world's manganese resources, which is in the Northern Cape province of South Africa. So I started there as a geologist. I then moved into business improvement, working for BHP Billiton. Then later moved into being a production supervisor in the pit, where I was in charge of the ROM operations as well as waste stripping. So I remember during that time when I was in one of the operations there, we brought consultants on site to try and wire the whole operation. From the phase where we were actually mining manganese up until it gets into the trains. So we brought consultants, and there was a project to actually implement MOS, which is a management operating system, which is a system that actually focuses on behaviors as well as what is it that you need to do in order for you to be able to achieve the plan, and making sure that people have the right behaviors attached to that. So one of the key issues we had was that consultants came and they designed all these wonderful spreadsheets for us, you know, with all these complicated formulas that if you've never worked with Excel before and you start punching in numbers and it starts producing all these beautiful graphs, you would be very impressed. However, we also need to acknowledge that we operate in a mining environment. Perhaps here in South Africa, it's different from other countries, but we don't have people who have the highest level of literacy who've been exposed to these systems. And even in your supervisor level, you still have people who have never been exposed to Excel or whatever these systems might be bringing into place. So it becomes very important that when you bring a system or introduce a system that each and every individual needs to operate within, first of all, it should be easy to use, it should be easy to implement, and on top of that, it should be able to drive the right behavior. And the fourth one, you should be able to get the results that you intended to get out of that system. So we implemented all these systems, and we also placed in a couple of white boards in the shift startup offices, whereby we would write the KPIs and the tonnages that people need to produce for that particular day. However, because we're working in a mining operation, we never got to a level of planning to detail up until activity level, whereby you know that this is how the plan is supposed to be, and these are the critical activities that needs to be done in that particular day in order for you to achieve the plan for the day. So we never had that. And with all these complicated spreadsheets that we're trying to wire everything together within the operation, our challenge was that as soon as the consultants left the site, it only took about 2 to 3 months and the system fell flat and the MOS completely fell flat. So the reason why I'm bringing this up is because it's very important that when you implement a management operating system, you have a system or a tool that actually helps you to manage or make that management operating system sustainable. So I became fortunate enough, then I moved over from one company to the other. And the organization that I moved into, I got introduced to Fusion. So I remember the first time I saw this system, I was like, yeah, man, this is something that we tried building, but we never knew how to actually do it. Because it was the only operation in South Africa that is actually currently using Fusion in this case. So Fusion plays a very key role in terms of our management operating system. If you look at the whole entire Plan, Do, Check, Act improvement cycle, it actually fits in very well. And on top of that, it brings all the stakeholders or all the departments or processes into one single plan, which then makes it easier for each and every individual who's on site to actually see what's actually happening and where they actually fit in the entire plan. So we even took it a little bit further, where the guys from Commit.Works actually assisted us by developing an app which would assist us in terms of doing short control interval on the key activities that have been planned in that particular day. So we've introduced Wi-Fi in our underground operation, which then makes it easier for our guys to actually go underground with all these cell phones, or let me not call it phone, a tablet, with the Fusion app. Then while we are on surface, because we've got Wi-Fi underground, it makes it easier for us to even track the key activities that are supposed to be happening on an hourly basis. Then because within the same app, we can also communicate with the guys from underground. It makes things easier, so all the plans that each and every individual from different departments have committed to, they are visible to each and every person on site. We've got screens all over. So it even drives accountability from different individuals. So that's one of the benefits that we've been receiving in terms of using Fusion. And we also use it at the open cast site as well. And on top of that, because we have different levels of meetings that actually feed to one big meeting that is chaired by the general manager on site, we use Fusion automated reports. So all these reports, we get them every morning before all our meetings start up. And we've never had any issue. I don't remember of any day that we had issues, except when we had our own network issues. And the support that we actually receiving from the guys, it's quite great. The turnaround time in terms of system upgrades, if we need certain things, the guys are actually always there to come on board and assist. So I must say that in terms of our MOS, the sustainability part of it, Fusion is playing a very big role. And in terms of production as well as safety-wise, it actually improved how we manage safety and how we drive performance across all levels. So I would say that without Fusion, the whole Plan, Do, Check, Act improvement cycle wouldn't have been completed if we never had if we never had fusion. Because at the end of the day, the reason why we have MOS and want to drive the right behaviors and accountability, it's because you want to be able to look at your plan versus variance. But then what makes short control interval very important and critical to the success of the operation is that you don't get to wait up until the end of the shift, whereby now you're like, guys, we never achieved our targets. Where did we go wrong? So on an hourly basis, 2 hourly basis, 3 hourly basis, and also including that, we also have our escalation protocols in place to say, within the first hour, the second hour, the third hour, if certain things are not happening, and we can monitor it live from surface while the guys are actually busy doing the work underground, we can be able to act promptly. And I think one other thing that we also need to think about, and even those that have joined this conference, is that the power actually lies in the knowledge at hand. So the person that gets to react much faster gets to benefit more than the person that gets to react a little bit later. And that's the benefits that we've received from this short interval control app from Fusion.
Oh, that's fantastic, Mohini. Thank you very much for that. Looks like we've got Paul back.
Is back.
Thanks for joining us again.
Yeah, I don't know what happened there. I don't know when I stopped, but I was probably in full flight, and then I looked at the screen. I was like, no one's moved for a couple of seconds. So sorry about that.
That's all right. Why don't you pick up on the next slide if you want to take back?
Yeah, thanks, Mohini. That was awesome to hear.
Yeah, I think you got in halfway, but yeah, I'd started a long time ago. Derrick put me
and put Mohini on the spot there, and he did well.
Okay. That's good. That's good. That's you got to be able to do that as a business improvement person, eh? Stand up and tell people stuff. Am I presenting now? I don't need to belabor this too much.
Yeah, no, just finish off what you had there, and we'll get back into some of the discussion. Just maybe if you can talk a bit, Paul, about how Fusion pulls the plans together, because that's something that I really I think people are very interested in.
Yeah, cool. I'll do that. I think that's the next slide. So, am I presenting? Am I the presenter? Press a button. Let's see. There we go. Yeah. So there's a lot of talk about short interval control and integrated planning, and I think one of the things we realized, and this wasn't what we did at the start, but one thing we realized a couple of years ago was that it was very important that the different kind of sources of information that people had for putting a plan together were able to be brought together easily for the team. And so we've built a lot of connectors. We've got lots of different ways of bringing data into Fusion for the different kind of tools that are out there. So as long as we can get a file out of it, or we can attach to a database of some sort, or we can get some kind of web methods, hookup, an integration layer, whatever, we don't really care. There's a lot of different ways we can get data out of these kind of systems. But the key is that they're all brought together into the right kind of conversation so that people can have an integrated plan. So in this particular meeting down here on that slide, you can see there are people from geology, survey, each of the different mining areas, maintenance, the mine manager is over here, there's business improvement people. Anyone who wants to do anything underground is in the meeting every week and every day to talk about what they're going to do and make sure that their work is sensible and can happen all at once. And so that kind of frontline work management is really important, but it's no good if you don't have the benefit of the information from those other systems. And equally, as Mohini was talking about before, this whole short interval control thing, we've got the app, but look, we've done short interval control in about 10 different ways as well. Where people have been calling up radio calls from underground to say this is where we're up to against this sort of plan. But again, they're doing it with a plan, right? So they're not just calling up and saying I've done this many meters. They're saying I've done this many meters. I should have got to done this many meters. I should have done 10, I've done 12, or I should have done 10 and I've done 8, and the reason for the variance is this, and so that's the kind of conversation we're trying to happen. That can happen on an app, or it can happen over the radio, or it can happen on a piece of paper. But the main thing is that there's, at regular intervals, people are checking where they're up to, becoming aware of where they're against their plan, and then acting to bring themselves back into line. And that's really the art of short interval control. And then, if that's happening successfully, we're getting that kind of the quality plan from above. We're getting the feed from the short interval control tools at the face. Then people can do real-time schedule control and adjustment on the fly. And actually, on a BHP mine the other day, and we saw this happening with manual tools. We saw these guys. They've got the guy sitting in the tower, and he's on the radio, and they've got these two massive whiteboards with sticky with magnets on it, and they're moving these magnets around on the screen on these whiteboards, and the guy's getting the call. He's saying, oh, "What am I going to do now?" Okay, so we move this guy here. Okay, and he's really stoked. He's excited because he's sitting up on the surface, and he's really engaged with what's going on underground. So what we're going to work with them. They've just gone and purchased two 98-inch touch screens, and they're going to replace their whiteboard with these two 98-inch touch screens, and they'll be running the new Fusion scheduler screen on that, and they'll be able to see everything from all the work that's going on underground, and it'll just be happening. And they'll use that in their daily planning meeting, as well as their pre-shift briefings for briefing the supervisor before they go to work. And if they do put Wi-Fi in underground, they'll be able to see where the tasks are up to on from completion of the app. So I think that to do this kind of frontline, to do this short interval control thing properly, you really need to have that full stack from one end of that picture to the other. If you try to do that with multiple systems, as I understand some organizations have, it gets pretty complicated, because you're trying to get people that don't necessarily want to talk to each other and different kinds of systems. So that's really what Fusion is designed to do, is to get that kind of, we don't want to be SAP or Deswick or XPack or any of those kind of tools, but we want to be able to take their data, and we don't want to be Mobilaris or Nutrax or anyone who's tracking data underground, but we want to be able to get that data off those people and those systems, and then make it so that supervisors and crew can adapt and act on their plans. That makes sense? Kind of the sticky bit in the middle. Oh, there we go. So we believe that if you get all that stuff into one place, I pressed the button twice, but that'll do. You get all that stuff into one place, you end up with a commitment system, and that's really what Fusion is designed to do, is to create that kind of commitment system. I think at the GMSG event that we met at, Derrick, Lars talked and had a picture of the what I would have described as the management system that they were using as they went down to the front line, and I saw that, and I was a bit inspired to draw up our own kind of view of that, having done many brown papers of this kind of stuff in the past. And so I think what I've tried to get across here is that these are, these boxes are the basic kind of elements of a management system. And short interval control is just this bit down the bottom here, right? And I don't think you can get that kind of thing going unless you've got a good weekly plan, unless that weekly plan is turned into some kind of detailed resource shift plan, that then gets handed over through shift handovers and pre-starts to a group of people that are going to go and execute in a short interval control way. Those things, that short interval control should end up in shift reports and in daily reports and in weekly reports. And people should be regularly looking for variances and actions, and trying to, when there is a variance, they should be looking for what's the action in order to replace that. And I know that the Anglo-American guys have spent a lot of time making sure there's an action for every variance. If you go to any of those kind of meetings, they talk about that, whether it's at the shift level, the day level, or in front of the general manager. So this action log kind of thing. So we, just to kind of position this, there's a lot of stuff that happens down here at the machine level, at the location-based stuff, which when we go to these kind of GMSG events, there's a lot of conversation from those kind of people that are acquiring data off places, talking about delays, etc. And there's a lot of talk from the kind of the Rungis and the DesWorks and the tech services teams. I haven't seen anybody from a maintenance system, from SAP or Oracle at one of these kind of events, but we have got systems integrators turning up to them. So there's there's a bit of that, and then we have kind of people like Deloitte turning up talking about business improvement, that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of stuff going around the outside, but the bulk of the people on an operation are working at this level, doing this kind of stuff day by day, shift by shift. That makes sense? So it's our view that if you can get a good plan into those guys' hands, that it makes sense, and that they're happy to commit to it. They'll be happy to commit to it, and that on that basis, they will be more likely, the manager will feel like it's kind of under control and that they're going to get results, and that the crew themselves will feel like the guys that they work for actually know what they're doing. And when this is working really well, they'll feel like they've actually had some input into the plan and they had a good shift. Now, Rob's paused himself, but that might be because he's got to go off and train a whole lot of people, and I'm aware we haven't had much of his time. But maybe, Rob, you can kind of cut in now and talk a little bit about some of your experiences. You have to leave in about 10 minutes, yeah?
Yeah, that's right, Paul. I'm running an implementation of Fusion at the Cannington mine here, so I've got a very important group of supervisors who we need to spend some time with shortly. But if I could just step back just a little bit to my experience over 40 years in mining and 20 years of doing this type of integrated planning and scheduling, and being responsible for a lot of these monster spreadsheets that Fusion has effectively replaced. You come back to what you actually are using technology for. What's the purpose of this? And of course, what we really want to do is get high-performing work teams. There's, to some extent, what you get with a small group of people and a whiteboard is what we really want to recreate in a large organisation with the right software to enable everyone to know what's going on, what's important, being aware of what's happening, who might need some help. And generally, my experience has been that everybody wants to go to work and get a good result. And it's a matter of having the systems there so that they can talk to each other, hold the conversations about the work. And that's where Fusion has really sort of come in, because it enables people to have lots of conversations. The information is there in front of them. The information is up to date. They can talk about the work, and it steps right down to the level of short interval control, because again, we're dealing with live data. People can be their own measurement system and understand what the results should be, and are they going well, are they not going well, and have a system that's allowing them to provide that instant feedback and give them the information to be able to make really well-informed decisions. So what I've found is that Fusion puts that information in the hands of the people who you want to make decisions, and they can talk to each other and come up with a really good result for the group as a whole. And also, in some ways, I see technology as a double-edged sword, because it can allow people to micromanage. If you're using it from too high a level, you could, as a manager, delve down and see exactly what's happening in the hour by hour on the shift. Whereas what we really want technology to do is empower the people who are living that hour by hour life, the shift, to be able to make the right decisions as they go through. So it gives us that easy means to have lots of conversations and the process to feed back information into a system. And if I look at, for example, the last Fusion implementation I did at Rio Tinto's Kestrel operation, I had a really good opportunity there, because we're able to see what it was like before Fusion was implemented, and then after Fusion was implemented, Rio got us back to look at their management operating system. And what we found was that with Fusion in place, it gave a massive boost to their business processes. It really supported their shift lead, daily, weekly planning, scheduling, responding to variance, execution. All of those processes now had an easy-to-use tool that was providing the right information at the right time, supporting their decision-making and identifying variance and how to get back on track. So I've seen the before and after. I've seen the clumsy attempts to produce something that gave people the excuse to talk to each other and get things right. And I've seen what Fusion is now producing. So I just wrap up with that in terms of complication, it's very difficult to achieve that same level of integration without a system like Fusion. Thanks very much. I do have to go and catch up with the supervisors now, but thanks for the opportunity to participate.
It's great, Rob. Thank you very much. Really appreciate you joining us this morning.
Yeah, thank you very much, Rob. It's nice to see you.
Yep, and all the best to you. Bye.
I'll talk to you soon. Okay, so I'll just keep on rolling. So yeah, just probably a couple of those slides there were about some of the results we've had, and this one here is out of Moranbah's, the Anglo International website, talking about improved production off their longwall. Most people here aren't longwall miners, but you probably hear from Rob there. We're starting to do some good work with some underground hard rock mines as well. The kind of implementation here we did tends to take us a few weeks to get things set up, and then within a space of 6 to 10 weeks on site, we've pretty much trained everybody in the first couple of weeks, and we'll be using the plan. But we like to stay for a little bit longer to make sure that the behaviours are implemented effectively. Certainly one thing, and probably this is where we match up and kind of mesh in with the PACE guys, is that just this kind of insight that Rob and I think Mohini mentioned, is that when it's easy to use, the change management is a whole lot easier. I think sometimes change management is a little bit like a jar of Vaseline to help you insert something that people don't really want. We try to make sure that we're passionate about change management, but we make sure that when we do the change, we've actually spent a lot of time with people, so we make sure we're giving them something that's going to work for them. Fusion was built pretty much from the ground up, with miners making specifications and saying this is what we want. You heard from Mohini. We built a lot of features for the team over in South Africa. We built a lot of stuff for the guys in Australia. We're building stuff for Cannington right now. We'll build stuff for BHP over the next few weeks and months as well. So we're constantly trying to taking stuff in from people and trying to make that work. And what that means is when people use it, they go, oh, hey, that makes sense. Oh, that's a bit easy to use. Oh, mate, and they start to really engage with it without us really kind of asking. One of our techniques is we stick up these touch screens in public places and we put Fusion on it, and then we just sort of step back and just watch people start trying to play with it, and they work it out in a couple of minutes, and then they're starting to talk about performance. So we haven't had to spend hours and hours of training because it just kind of makes sense. It's a website, right?
We look at one of the things that we're looking at, with our technology adoption, and we look at technology adoption models. Some of the key things, that come up are, for people to adopt technology, one, they need to see its usefulness to them, and two, you've got to perceive it at least as easy for them to use. And those are two of the real keys to getting people to want to use technology. And if you can accomplish those, you're at least 2/3 of the way there.
Yeah, that's good. Nice that there's a theory behind it, isn't there? I think it's funny. Sometimes people say, "Oh, what do the supervisors think?" Are they get all frustrated about this kind of potential for micromanagement and that kind of stuff. And we've really never had any pushback from the frontline guys. We generally, they generally look at this and get really excited because they suddenly have a voice. They can start. They're stoked that the guys who are supposed to be giving them a plan are suddenly able to give them a plan that makes sense. Firstly, and secondly, they have a voice now to say, this is why I had a variance, and this is why this didn't happen the way you wanted it to happen, and that can feed back through the system into those kind of meetings that mean that they actually get some change at the far end. And so people, the largest group of people that we'd work with are the frontline planners and the supervisors, and they generally just grab this with both hands and get tearing. So we have to hold them back more often than we have to kind of convince them.
Mohini, I was going to ask you if what was the experience with the frontline users when you got the tablets and the phones into their hands, and how did they respond to that?
Yeah, look, the response was quite good, and purely because before we had the infrastructure underground to allow them to start updating their plans as work progresses. It was always a matter of saying when they get to surface, they need to go to the touch screens and update the plan. So for them, it was quite interesting and fascinating as well to say, now we are able to update the plan. By the time we get on surface, you even save a lot of time in terms of the meeting, because you get to surface, you're tired from working underground, and you're now thinking of going home. Now you need to update the plans and communicate some of the information which you are unable to communicate during the shift. So it makes life easier for them. You know, when it's end of shift, it's end of shift. They're just gonna go and have their debriefing meetings. Then with the debriefing meetings, the information is already there. So the implementation was quite simple because it was more beneficial to everyone, all the stakeholders that are actually using the system.
So you had
so I've got a couple of those.
an interim process that was slightly more difficult for them and more time consuming. And then when you got the handheld devices in their hands, it made it that much easier. So there wasn't much in the way of pushback. That's great.
Made it much easier. So for instance, with regards to an open cast operation, so if you don't have a device with you, if you find time within your operation, you can go to a touch screen wherever it's located. But it always makes it easier when you have a device on you, because you can take pictures and all that, you know, get to update stuff while we are actually on the actual coal phase. So for underground operation, it was even, you know, unlocking other potentials to say you can now do everything underground. So you'll see some of the pictures that have been going past our Paul's presentation. So all these pictures are actually from our Sabula operations, most of them, where you see the guys actually updating on the touch screen itself, and the meetings that you might have seen from the other guys sitting around the table. All those reports, we actually get them automated from this system. So it actually helps foremen and supervisors to get the required attention from surface or assistance that might be required from surface. Because most of the time you find that you will tend to operate in a silo, and if there are no other additional people who can see what's actually happening, instead of saying, look, I might be micromanaged because of this system, like Rob said, they understand that the opportunities that it unlocks, it far exceeds the notion of saying I might be micromanaged. So we are matured to such an extent that even though every person on site has visibility to the plan, there is hierarchy which people need to follow in order to get the message to the frontline supervisor. So not everyone just jumps in and say, hey, I'm seeing this thing is going wrong, what can we do? So there is a very good protocol which we follow, and it's quite straightforward and simple. So it is helping. So it was quite received very well from the frontline guys.
That's fantastic. Oh, that's great. Good.
Yeah, so I flicked through a few of those slides kind of quickly, but I guess I'm not sure I can go backwards. But the basic gist of that was that, you know, there's people are doing planning meetings, you know, that they're giving the plan to the guys that go out there into the field with it. They're using it in the pre-shift briefings. I think we turned up at a pre-shift briefing. Zamari was upset because it started 2 minutes late, but you know, I was amazed to see, you know, 3 years after this was originally implemented, these guys are turning up. Everybody's in the room, they're standing around, the supervisor's standing in front of the screen, telling people what to do. You know, showing the plan to everybody in one place. They're all kind of talking about it. They've got a printed shift plan in their hands. They're going, you know, and they're ready to go to work with a pretty good idea of what they've got to do, you know. And then now with the app, they're out there in the field using the app, and at the end of the shift, they're coming back, filling in the last little bits of their shift reports, which are then going back to those kind of meetings in that previous slide. So, you know, that whole cycle, when we turned up at Sabula, was just healthy and well. You know, when we go to Moranbah North and Grasstree and some of these other mines, you know, they implemented Fusion 4 or 5 years ago now, and they've been through successive general managers, successive mine managers, and planning managers and superintendents, and you know, changed their teams many times, and yet the system is still there, getting better and better every time. And the people that use it own it. They really own it. We took investors around to Kestrel not that long ago, and I didn't have to open my mouth. They would just ask people, and they would say the kind of stuff that Mohini was saying just before. So it was really nice to be involved in that kind of thing.
Right.
It gets a bit of a life of its own, and it ceases being our software and becomes theirs, which is good.
That's fantastic.
What
and I think just to add, yes, Derek?
Go ahead.
Yes, I was saying from being a supervisor before, whereby you don't have a plan that sort of integrates everything and all the key activities for that particular day. And I think most people who are in mining operations, or more especially the frontline guys, can attest to this. There tends to be a lot of noise that comes from different departments or processes within the mine, whereby certain individuals wants this thing done for them, that person wants this done, that one wants this done. So this system, it also helped us to eliminate all this noise, so that the supervisor knows what is it that they need to focus on. And I think one of the best tools or functionalities that we have of this system is being able to prioritize your key activities for the day. So if you get to your working place and you've got 15 activities, but then you don't know which are the key activities that you need to complete before you can actually move on to the other activities, it becomes a problem. So in this case, we also have that advantage of prioritizing the activities. And if it happens that the supervisor starts doing activities that are of less priority compared to the others, whoever who's their superior can be able to question and say, yes, I see you are completing stuff within this hour, but it seems like you're focusing on the wrong things. So it's one of the key functionalities that it's adding so much value as well in our operation.
So Mohini, who in your operation is creating those priorities? Where does the prioritization come from?
Yeah, so we'll have a monthly plan, which then gets broken down into a weekly plan. So in our weekly planning meeting, we will have all the stakeholders in the mine. But then how we run our planning meeting, it's quite smart since the implementation of Fusion. So instead of everyone coming on board and say, this is what I'm planning to do next week, and that's what I'm planning to do next week. So everyone gets to go into their own planning board on Fusion. They plan everything, and everything is fused into one. Then we'll have one planning sheet, which then goes into the planning meeting. Then that planning sheet, we print it out for everyone, and we also project the Fusion plan onto the screens and say, these are the critical activities that needs to happen for this next coming week. And the most important part of it is that if you are sitting in one department and there is certain work that you need to be completed by someone who's sitting in another department, you get to assign it sitting from your front planning board on Fusion. You get to assign it, then it appears on their planning screen. So they know that according to whatever resources that they have in place, or if they don't have enough resources, they can be able to decline to say, no, because of these certain reasons, we cannot be able to commit to this particular activity. But then if they are able to commit, they will then accept it. So all this information of the activities that have been accepted and rejected, or maybe activities that other people maybe never got a chance to see. So all that we get to see in one plan. So when we run our planning meeting, we don't focus more on the activities that have already been accepted by different individuals, because with them accepting it, it means they've already committed to the plan. So what the person who's chairing the planning meeting does would look at these activities that were declined and see how important they are in terms of adding value to what we want to achieve in that particular week. So we will go through all that stuff that has been declined. We'll go through all those activities that have not been accepted. Then once we've went through all those activities, we can then decide whether that particular activity needs to be accepted or it should remain as it is. So at the end of the day, you've got this great plan which everyone actually contributed towards. So when you're sitting in your separate departments, for example, let's say you are a mine overseer who's in charge of the planning for a particular section. You, before the meeting, there's a pre-planning meeting that you will have with your foreman, giving you relevant or important information with regards to a particular area that you want to go and mine. So in that case, you don't run at the risk of just planning blind. You have all this information, and you can also look at the reports from the previous week, the activities that were completed the previous week, and sort of try to reconcile and see how you can actually develop a great plan. So at the end of the day, it goes far beyond just whether you managed to do the task or you didn't do it. So it brings everyone together, so we all speak the same language. And in terms of organization, it brings order, you know, because when we have our commitment meetings on a daily basis, we still use Fusion to say, yes, guys, we've planned this last week, and now we are here, and our plan for the next day, this is how it's looking like. But looking at what's currently happening today and what we need to do tomorrow, what is it that we need to do to make sure that we still achieve the plan if it's not achievable? But with the addition of the short control interval in place, it actually eliminates most of the key issues that we'll normally experience from moving from this particular plan on this day to the plan for the following day. So it even makes our commitment meetings quite easier.
That's great.
So that's awesome.
Your overall adherence or compliance to your plan must have improved dramatically.
No, it improved significantly.
Yeah.
And look, I must say that there's a slide that Paul shared with regards to people on the front line saying, those guys don't know what they're actually doing. And this whole fusion thing, it also speaks about how to change the mentality of those people who are sitting there, you know, doing the actual work on the face, because they can see when the plan is not working, and sometimes because they don't have that power to sort of, you know, change things around, and it becomes a little bit difficult to sort of understand where you are actually sitting in terms of improving your organization. So as soon as you start implementing a system of this nature, then you start getting this good response, this good energy from the people who are on the ground, because they are also giving us feedback to say, look, ever since we introduced this thing, we can see order in terms of how we are doing things, and it drives performance. And at the end of the day, they also get to benefit from all the improvements that we have with regards to production. They get more production bonuses like they've never received before. So it's quite amazing. And like I said, the simplicity of the system is very important. Any person should be able to interact with the system. We all have these smartphones nowadays, and this thing works like a smartphone or even easier than that. So in one of our open cast operation, we had a change of contracts, and I must say, for me to train those guys and make them understand what the system is all about, I just need 30 minutes, 15 minutes to explain it, and 15 minutes to go with them to the screen and show how you do it. And that's it, and they run with it, you know. So it's not complicated. It's very, very easy, I must say.
That's great.
That's awesome. Thanks, Mohini.
Yeah. So we've gone about an hour now, which is what I was hoping to do before we sort of get out to questions. I haven't had any questions come in as of yet, but I'd like to turn it over to those who are attending. If any of you have any questions, it's been my show here, me asking things that I'm interested in so far. If you guys have any things for Mohini or Paul, you know, please type them into your chat window, and I will pass them along to those guys, and we'll get some answers for you.
Yeah, really interested in questions.
Yeah. I really, one of the things that I think is great is you know, you guys talking about the feedback loop into the plan, and I think that's really important. A lot of mines that I've talked to, you know, when we talk about compliance to plan, and you talk to the operators and even the supervisors, and I hear them say, you know, we can't follow those plans. Those plans don't make any sense. You know, so how can you get commitment to a plan that people don't believe in? So I love what Mohini said about the overall process and that information coming back from operators to you know, to inform the plan going forward.
Yeah, there's a bit of subtlety to that too. Sometimes in the training we give to planners, we sometimes, you know, make suggestions to them. We ask questions to them about whether they think that the supervisor would understand what they've written in the way that they have written it. You know, like if you use a mining engineer describes something in the way that they would talk to their mining engineering mates about something, that might not actually make sense to the guys out in the front. So the feedback loop of, that's what you asked me to do, you know, it didn't make any sense, kind of starts to create a situation where the way that the task is written, you know, the action, you know, starting with a verb and that kind of thing, actually ends up making it easier for the two sides, you know, the planner and the supervisor and the team to communicate with each other. I see there's a question there.
Yeah, I got a couple questions here, so I'll just I'll mention Sean. So Sean's got a question first. What kind of tools do you see people using for roster vacation scheduling that you pull into Fusion? What tools or systems have you seen that come from?
Yeah, it's a good question. So you know, we can pull, so for Anglo and South Africa, we pull that data directly out of SAP. Okay. It's a funny thing though, like South 32, Rio, BHP use a system called SureSight, which tells you all the people that are going to be on site. So we can pull data from there too. But like we've always, when we start off kind of putting the system together, we always try to go out there and find all this information. And the IT guys always tell us that it's always in SAP or it's always in SureSight or something. But in reality, we end up having to go around and pick up the rosters and the leave out of people's spreadsheets that they're running it from on their desks, because those corporate systems tend to not be up to date because they're not really used on the day-to-day basis. So we go around, we collect all that kind of data, and then we actually have a roster and a leave management system inside Fusion. And what ends up happening is that we either connect that to those kind of parent systems, and then some of that data comes through into Fusion, but we also connect it in the other direction, because generally on a site there's a whole lot of contractors that don't exist inside the ERP and that kind of thing. So you actually need a single source of truth for where all the people are and what they're going to be doing of a day. If someone says they're not coming to work tomorrow, well, you need to be able to reflect that in the plan. You can't wait for that to go back through the integrated outsourced vendor, that CSC or whatever that's managing that stuff. And 2 weeks later, you get the kind of SAP leave come back into Fusion, you know. So you end up having to act on that kind of stuff really quickly inside Fusion. So the short answer is rosters, leave, etc., can live quite comfortably inside Fusion, as they have done on spreadsheets on people's desks for the last little while. But they can also connect out and back to ERPs, which are the supposed sources of truth for that kind of information. That just saves people a lot of stuffing around. You know, if there's a roster change and that kind of stuff, people need to move, they can put that into Fusion and immediately, or they can wait for it to come through from the restructured kind of data out of the source system.
Fantastic. I've got another question here from Gordon. He's asking how is a long-term schedule broken down to the task level and scheduled from something like Deswick Scheduler, for example?
Yeah, so there's a few different ways to do that. We've got a tool now, this Gantt scheduler tool, and so if we were to pull a 3 or 4 or a 5 day task into Fusion from one of these other systems, it's going to have a start time and an end time, and it's going to have a whole lot of tons or meters or something attached to it. The simple answer to that question is there's a little button on that bar that says split this task, and it just splits the task into the shifts across the week that it's been planned for, and it takes the target for that week and then just divides that up across those shifts. Now that is generally not exactly right, because you might be taking a cut on this shift, a cut on that shift, a cut on that shift, and a cut in 3 days time. And so that kind of the Gantt bar from Deswick or Deswick Ops may not be exactly as it will be executed, but at least it gives you a kind of idea to say this is what should. This is the time in which that work needs to be completed. And then there's one thing that we haven't really mentioned, but is important to understand, is that nobody ever took a cut of out of a heading without doing some enabling activities before they actually took the cut. And so so you are going to need to drag and drop some little packages of tasks in around that work, so that you can actually do that. So that the services are brought up, the ventilation is brought up, the place is cleaned up before you go there and try and do it, the wall scale, that kind of stuff. So all that kind of work that happens around the specific kind of mining activity that would be planned inside a mine planning system needs to be, which is what a lot of the guys are actually doing in the mining process, needs to be kind of scheduled in as well. And so we tend to find that people, you go, okay, cool, that task has come in from EPS or from Deswick or wherever it might have come from, or maybe we've just uploaded it from a spreadsheet for Lars at Belieden. They've got a Gantt scheduler that they use, so we just connected to that and brought that data in. So even people have been talking about Deswick Ops and how that kind of works, and in our view, it's in no way competitive with us at all. If someone has gone to the trouble of scheduling all that kind of work from a management, from a production perspective, into low levels of granularity, then all of that can come straight into Fusion really easily, and it just schedules the week out in a collaborative kind of format on our system. And then someone brings in their SAP tasks, and you can see, well, actually we can't take that cut on that day because that drill's not going to be available, or that bogger that we were going to use won't be there. So then you move things around and you can kind of get the plan right in that kind of place. So I don't see there being a real kind of us or them situation on that. I just see that you need a mine planning system that can go down to a level of granularity, excellent, but you also need a frontline operations management system to make that stuff into reality.
That's great.
I don't know if that's a question, Gord. I mean, that's probably a bit more detail needed, but
that was pretty good detail. I had another one just around what operating systems are the mobile apps available for currently?
So at the moment, the mobile app is available on Android. Fusion itself runs, it's a web-based tool, so it works on any system, it doesn't matter whether it's Apple, Android, Windows, whatever. It's basically just a web tool. So, that works fine right across platforms, but the offline, online app, one of the biggest challenges that people have in getting these kind of things to work is to get the offline capability to work. It's quite hard. There's a lot of kind of business rules that go into when this happens. If it's offline, what do I do about it? How do I do it? And when we started building the system for the offline tool, we had to go at 2 or 3 different platforms and failed in 2 or 3 different platforms before we went for the native app. So we tried to get a web app to convert into and it just didn't work. So we've ended up building it native for Android, and we have plans to convert that into an Apple app at some point in the future. One thing we have noticed though is you can use the system through an emulator in Windows. So if you've got Windows tablets, there are Android emulators available which will run the system perfectly. So right now, straight out of the box, you can use it on an Android phone, Android tablet, or a Microsoft device. Yeah.
Great. Okay. Any other questions, guys? I just see one fellow had to drop off here, but that's great. Any other questions from anyone out there that we haven't covered, that Paul or Mohini have not been able to touch on yet? We'll give them a couple minutes here. I think that was very thorough, guys. I very much appreciate the comments and the details you've given so far. I think that's it's been well received. So we'll just check for a couple more questions here, and I'm not seeing too many. Not seeing any at all. So I think guys, that we've done a good job today. I really appreciate your time. I appreciate Mohini, you being up late for us, and Paul, you getting up early for us. When we were trying to schedule everyone on this call, we found that there wasn't really a good time for anybody that worked. So it was later in the day for us, and I'm glad we got the folks that we did. And like I said, this will be available on our YouTube channel, so we'll send that out to anyone else who is interested and wasn't able to attend, because we know it was a tough time for a lot of people. But for those of you who did come, I appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you on our next webinar. That being said, I've got that up right now. Our next webinar is with David Gallia, Manager of Operational Excellence from North American Palladium. He is based at the Lac des Îles mine, and his webinar will be on pursuing real-time mine management. So it's a good follow-up from this, and they're going to talk about their journey and where they've gotten to so far, and what they're planning next in their journey towards that real-time mine management. So thank you all for attending. Mohini and Paul, thank you for being on the call here and joining us. And everyone have a great day or a great evening, whichever suits you. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Derrick. Thanks, Mohini. Speak soon.
Thanks, Derrick. Going to sleep now.
All right.
Man.
Go to sleep now. Have a good night.
Good night, mate.
All right.
All right, cool.
Take care, everyone.
Derrick?
Yes, sir.
Yes. When are you uploading it to YouTube?
Hang on just 1 second.
Okay.